Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to your Friday Rambling. And there's nothing scarier than getting marble-mouthed in your intro. That's bad foreshadowing for your spooky video. That's right, it's time for our final Friday Ramblings entry in our October-themed spooktacular season. Ooh, a lot of big words there. And we're going to end it with something that, well, gets right down to the nitty-gritty. We're coming full circle. We started with classic literature, and we are ending with modern literature. That is right, comic books. It's all well and good. It's a wonderful format. We are not going to justify the reading of comic books. It is for all ages. Comic books are not just for children anymore, and they never were. Specifically, we're going to focus on the Marvel Comics characters who have a supernatural slant to their lifestyle. First things first, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate a few contenders right out of the opening bell. We're not going to discuss Ghost Rider because I already did another Friday Rambling discussing Ghost Rider and its legacy identity, the various folks that have used the name Ghost Rider, and the little tweaks they brought to the superheroic identity. We are not going to discuss Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, because to discuss him would require a long-running video all on its own, and frankly, most people are familiar with him thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What we are trying to do here today, as we do with almost all of our ramblings, is get you to look at something you may have overlooked. We are looking at the slightly less known characters in the MCU. And thus, we have our list. Now, this is not a fully comprehensive list by far, but this will hopefully wet your whistle and get you ready for more supernatural fun with superheroes and heroines who are a bit spooky, as well as a couple villains. Now we're going to go ahead and start things off with the Big Daddy. Oh wait, first, excuse me, we are also not going to go into an in-depth discussion on Vampire Hunter Blade. Blade is familiar to most people due to the trilogy of movies where he was portrayed by Wesley Snipes, as well as a one-season TV show where he was portrayed by Stick A Fingers. I thoroughly enjoy the movies. I own them. But Blade, much like Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange, can certainly get plenty of highlight on his own. However, one of Blade's chief enemies we are going to discuss real quick, and that is the Marvel Comics version of Dracula. Because he tends to tie into a lot of other stuff, and hey, there's always room for a little Dracula talk. Now, the Marvel Comics version of Dracula follows the Vlad Tepes model by and large in his origins. We do have a few tweaks to how he became vampiric. And that is that in Marvel Comics, Dracula was mortally wounded by the Turkish warlord Turok, who brought Dracula to a gypsy named Leonda to be healed. However, Leonda was herself already a vampire, and in revenge for his persecution of the gypsies, transformed Dracula into a vampire as well. Turok raped and killed Dracula's wife Maria, and in revenge, Dracula slew Turok, making him a vampire as well. Dracula then later defeated the vampire Nimrod I in battle, and thus succeeded him, gaining Dracula the title of ruler of all of Earth's vampires. Soon afterwards, he enhanced his own blood with that of Varney, who in Marvel Comics is considered the original vampire, giving him greater power than any other vampire. Eventually, we would get to the 19th century, where Dracula would face opposition from Abraham Van Helsing and Jonathan Harker in England, paralleling the Bram Stoker novel. In the Marvel Comics version, his defeat would be undone by Frankenstein's monster, who was tricked into unsealing the coffin, thus freeing Dracula after Dracula had regenerated from his wounds. Thus, Dracula would be unleashed on the relatively modern world, including, just before World War I, responsible for transforming Lord John Falsworth into a vampire known as Baron Blood. Baron Blood would be a major player in the Marvel UK comics, tied into Union Jack, a British superhero who is seen as a more blue-collar version of Captain Britain. In the latter half of the 20th century, Dracula returned from the dead again and subsequently came into conflict with Quincy Harker and Rachel Van Helsing. I told you. You mumble-mouth your intro, you're cursed for the rest of the video. After coming upon information about the Darkhold, the ultimate book of dark magic in the Marvel Universe, Dracula began to seek the power of the Dark Book to remove his vampiric weaknesses and make himself truly immortal. However, he would be foiled by the X-Men, the now vampiric Rachel Van Helsing, Thor, Doctor Strange, the Avengers, as well as Blade himself. Dracula and every other vampire would disappear for a while when the Montesi formula was cast from the Darkhold, removing all vampires from Earth. The Montesi formula was later negated, allowing Dracula to return and start creating a new vampire army. We would later see evil scientists create clones of Dracula, but nothing ever quite managed to be quite as dangerous as the original. Dracula would continue to war against the superhero community, including once again striking at the United Kingdom-based heroes, launching a war from his base upon the moon, specifically the dark side of the moon, thus never being exposed to sunlight. Eventually, he would be defeated in this, as well as a few other schemes. This all led to the most recent storylines in which in Avengers, Dracula claims that he has grown tired with unlife and sought sanctuary from other vampire subclans who wanted to kill him to formally ascend to the throne as ruler of all vampires. Dracula would be exiled to Chernobyl, aka Russian radioactive wasteland, figuring there's no mortals that can survive in there, so as long as he stays there, he can't harm any mortals. Dracula would reveal this was all a trick of his, allowing him to have a nation wherein nobody would be watching him while he assembles his vampire army, including some of those clansmen who were allegedly trying to kill him. In truth, they were essentially auditioning to be generals in his soon-to-come vampire army. Now, this all leads us to the question of, is the Marvel Comics Dracula all that great? He's a pretty big schemer, plotter, and he always has a second plan in mind to save his own butt. He's certainly a dangerous foe due to his intelligence and centuries of warfare, giving him a very strategic and tactical mind. However, there are many other vampires of note in the Marvel Universe, including Deacon Frost, who was shown in the first Blade movie, and various other characters who have temporarily been turned vampire, especially the X-Men's own Jubilee. Speaking of vampires, we also have the pseudo-vampire, Dr. Michael Morbius, aka Morbius the Living Vampire, who showed up in the Spider-Man books, but eventually spun off into his own series and other horror-based titles on his own. The basic idea of Michael Morbius is that he is a scientist from Europe who, in an attempt to use radical treatment methods to cure blood-borne disease, found himself turned into what is for all intents and purposes a vampire, but not actually being an undead, hence the term living vampire. How much of a vampire he is has varied over the years as his powers have been altered against his will, sometimes by himself. However, classically, he has the pale skin look of a vampire, the standard super strength, flight, yada yada powers, as well as a hunger to feed on blood. He tries to prove that he's a good man at heart by only feeding on criminals and not feeding fatally if he can help it. He's at various times been both a hero and a villain, but remains always a tragic and sympathetic character as he only seeks to cure both his powers and, hopefully if he can cure what he has become, go back to his original plan of curing people with much more real-world style diseases of the blood. Morbius has shown up in various alternate reality stories, including the Ultimate Marvel reality, and a few Marvel Max imprints, where he has teamed up with other supernatural characters that we will later mention. Now, when it comes to the undead, we must mention Simon William Garth, aka the Zombie. The basics of Simon William Garth is that he was a work-obsessed executive of Garth Manor Coffee, based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Ambushed and kidnapped by his former gardener, whom he had fired, Garth is to be a voodoo cult's human sacrifice. Fortunately/unfortunately, the ceremony did not go as planned because the priestess was actually not only one of Garth's employees, but one who had an unrequited crush on Garth. Thus, she attempted to not turn him into a full-blown sacrifice and even help him escape, the result being that he is a zombie, but does have bouts of human intelligence to him, in which he tragically bemoans the horrible things he does when the zombie impulses take over. Garth is one of those characters that classically, depending on what is going on in his life, is either a hero or a villain. However, he can always be relied upon to survive whatever is thrown at him because, as a zombie, he is not truly dead, nor is he truly alive. He is something horrifically in between. Simon Garth featured in Marvel Zombies 4 miniseries, leading his own team trying to cure the zombie plague. He has also been a part of supernatural-themed versions of the Howling Commandos. there's one thing you gotta love, it's a werewolf, and we got two for you. First up, the more classic style werewolf, Jacob Rusev, legal name Jacob Russell, often called just Jack for short, is the werewolf by night. Jack is part of a family cursed Rusev line stretching back many centuries, and thus he is the kind of person who finds himself forced to live in the supernatural world, but under no real fault of his own. It is a family curse stretching back well before he was ever born. He tries to make the most of it, being as heroic as he can, although werewolf urges do get the best of him. He's worked with various superheroes over the years, although mostly he sticks to the supernatural side of Marvel, working with teams such as the Legion of Monsters and the Midnight Suns. Most infamously, Morbius was part of the Legion of Monsters team that revived Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, from death and turned him into the infamous Franken-Castle for a couple years before the Punisher was restored to proper life, though in the process he was de-aged back into his physical prime. A neat little set of story arcs designed to keep the Punisher young without actually giving him any kind of slow-aging superpowers. I don't know, Marvel gets weird with some of its timescale things, but Werewolves by Night is one of those characters that he makes a wonderful supporting character in a team book, but, solo, there's just only so much you can do with a werewolf in a world already populated by superheroes. Speaking of that, we got a werewolf who is a superhero in and of himself, and also tied into one of the most famous humans in the Marvel Universe. John Jameson, son of Daily Bugle publisher J. Jonah Jameson and occasional boss of Spider-Man / Peter Parker. John likes to run around calling himself the Man-Wolf, and is an astronaut who found a gemstone out in space. The gemstone bonded to him physically, and, under the right circumstances, turns him into the so-called Man-Wolf. Occasionally, he has gotten a further power boost, allowing him to retain his intelligence and access even higher levels of strength, referring to himself as the Star God. However, he tends to go out of his way to quickly purge himself of the Star God powers, as he finds that having the abilities of a god tends to make him very arrogant and somebody most folks don't like hanging around. While John has occasionally found use for the Man-Wolf, assisting both Spider-Man and working jobs as security of Ravencroft, which in the Marvel Comics verse is the foremost mental asylum for supervillains. When it's all said and done, John is always happy to rid himself of his powers, even if temporarily, due to the fact that that lovely little Man-Wolf gem just won't seem to let him go, and even when shattered, has regenerated itself within his body and reasserted the bond. Whether he's Man-Wolf or Star God, John Jameson is a furry fiend full of fury who is more than happy to take down even the most frightening of Marvel villains. Speaking of fear, it is said that all who know fear burn at the touch of the Man-Thing. Marvel's answer to DC's Swamp Thing, although for official reference, both creators have said they were both influenced by a Golden Age character known as the Heap. So no, there is no who created it first discussion here. The Man-Thing, aka Dr. Ted Sallis, is mostly found in a swamp in Florida that serves for the nexus of all realities. This being essentially a dimensional portal that, if you have the right powers and magical skills, can allow you to visit any alternate reality in all of existence. This nexus of reality is what is responsible for Howard the Duck ending up in our world and being trapped here, as he was not the intended target. That mage du jour, a lovely young lady known as Jennifer Kale, did not in fact have as much control over the Nexus as she had hoped. Man-Thing, besides being based off plant matter, and thus being able to constantly regenerate himself no matter how tore up his body may become, also has the classic superhuman strength, durability, and stamina, size alteration, but being a mystical person, also has the ability to teleport and create portals that other people can travel through, linked to his bond with the Nexus of all reality as its protector. The intro, though, is the most fun part, as Swamp Thing has an empathic sense, and those who show great fear in front of him suffer, as all those lovely plants, and as anybody who's ever gone on a nature walk know, many plants create substances that are not good for humans, releases a corrosive chemical upon contact. Thus, if you have enough fear in you, you will turn into ashy skeleton lump. All who know fear burn at the touch of the Man-Thing. Man-Thing can occasionally be lured out of his swamp to assist, although the creature's inability to speak a coherent human language most of the time limits most people's understanding of why he's here and whose side he may or may not be on until it happens. Man-Thing has also been a member of the Legion of Monsters, although he also has assisted the Avengers on occasion, as well as the Thunderbolts and the Ancient Order of the Shield. Man-Thing is one of those interesting characters because when he does show up outside of his swamp, you know something big, especially magical in nature, is about to go down. But at the same time, the character itself is so rooted in classic horror stories that it's hard to do much with him. Yes, the human mind and soul of Ted Sallis give Man-Thing a heroic lean, but it's still shambling plant matter that, if it intimidates you, it's going to make you burn. Man-Thing is certainly more heroic than people like Dracula, but when it comes to frightening, there's not many people that have zero fear of Man-Thing. As I said, one of them being Howard the Duck, the other being Jennifer Kale, who, well, frankly put, she's never come off as the most sane person anyway. In fact, let's just spend a little second discussing her. Jennifer Kale has teamed with the Midnight Suns, the Legion of Night, and led her own trio of female sorcerers known as the Witches. Routinely teams up with Man-Thing and Howard the Duck. And while she always has the best of intentions, tends to come off more as somebody who makes as much trouble as she helps. This means that while people are generally glad to have her magical expertise around, they're always a little suspicious she may cause the trouble to begin with. Regardless of that, she's got a good heart, and at least in any and all forms, she's human looking. We're going to wrap this up with a pair of siblings, one of whom is about to show up in some TV on their own right, and that is Damon Hellstrom, aka the son of Satan. The basic idea is that Damon Hellstrom is a half-human, half-demon hybrid, the son of Satan, although it's occasionally been attributed to a few other Marvel originally created demons, including the similarly named Satanish. As Damon Hellstrom put it once, you say son of Satan, people are going to be intimidated. You admit you're the son of somebody that the people outside of intense occult circles have never heard of, it's a harder reputation to sell. Damon is generally a heroic sort and has assisted the Avengers on several occasions, even serving as a reserve member. However, his ties to the hellish lands means that there are times where Damon has manipulated heroes for his own selfish gains and flat out been villainous. Over the years, Damon's portrayals have varied. One of the constants is that he loves to not wear a shirt, showing off his muscular body and occasional flaming pentagram tattoo. Damon is your classic bitter, jaded anti-hero who always seems to feel like no matter how much evil you've seen, you don't know the true evil that is out there. But when push comes to shove, a truly horrible being of pure evil descends upon the earth, Hellstrom will stand with the good guys. Whether he tries to pull his con of his own after the fact, when the world is safe, that can vary. But you can always rely on Damon to be nothing else, a great informant for what the Hell Lords are currently scheming. This has made him very useful to characters like Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider. Fortunately, Damon has a sister, Satana, who is just about as morally torn as Damon. Satana is one of Jennifer Kale's buddies in that aforementioned Witches team, and has also hung out with the Legion of Monsters and the Thunderbolts, as well as the Avengers on a few occasions. Satana is one of those characters that she would like to say she's doing good, but her own nature is just so inherently wicked and mischievous that she causes as much harm as she does good, and has been known to be one of the driving forces behind her brother Damon occasionally being more wicked than helpful. Satana, like Jennifer Kale, is a buddy of Man-Thing, but when it's all said and done, her hellish nature, including a bit of succubus to her, means that if she comes saddling up to you and telling you how good looking you are, you should probably make sure you leave with 100% of your soul intact. She is the ultimate bad girl. Does that mean you should always be afraid if Satana shows up? No. Like Damon, she does like to do a lot of good, especially if it spites her Hell Lord father. And if you're good at manipulation, you can certainly out-trick her into serving the greater good, even if she's not in the mood for it. Plus, like Damon, she has so many contacts on the evil demon side of things that, nothing else, bring her a bribe, make her a nice dinner. You can get some great information out of her to help save the world before it goes up in flames. What can we draw from all this chat, now that we're ready to conclude everything? Well, it's that if you do like your characters horrifying, hell-filled, creepy, and flat-out inhuman, there are plenty of Marvel Comics that can satiate your particular hunger. They sprinkle all over the Marvel Universe to make sure magic is never far behind from technology and mutants. And while many of them occasionally shouldn't be trusted too much, when it's all said and done, there's plenty that have a good heart, and you just got to be ready for their darker impulses to take control. That's what makes reading about these characters so much fun. The good news is, when it's all said and done, it is still a superhero's world, and even if they give in to their wicked ways, they're not going to cause too much trouble for somebody like a Captain America or a Wolverine comes by to smack them down. So, this October, go online to your favorite digital comics site, or go visit your local comic book shop and dig up some trades. Read up on some of these heroes. You got the Hellstrom siblings. You got the zombie. You got man-wolf or werewolf by night. No matter what your flavor, they're never far behind. And of course, the Man-Thing. Just remember, no matter how spooky things get, you are always in control, even on Halloween night. And that's why we're going to give you a little bonus gift. On Halloween night, we're not going to do another rambling because this has been 5, which is a lot of October delights. But our gaming side only got 4 Tuesdays. So on Saturday, October 31st, before you go trick-or-treating, come on back to Roulette Productions. We're going to have a very special Saturday game streaming. It's going to be retro, it's going to be nostalgic, and it's going to be supernatural. So, come on back, and if you've had your fill of spooks, don't worry, because come November we'll be back to our regular programming. But I hope you enjoyed our second annual Halloween-themed rambling series, and we hope you've checked out some of the various things we've talked about. No matter what, we appreciate you viewing. We appreciate any feedback you choose to leave. We definitely appreciate if you tell your friends to come check us out. And whether you disagree with anything we've said, whether you're upset that we left out something you love, well, we're not going to be that angry at you. Because at Roulette Productions, we understand. You can disagree, you can criticize. That's still not the same thing as hating. Hopefully, I'm going to see you tomorrow on October 31st for our special game stream. If not, I hope you have a happy Halloween. And I'll see you in 7 as we go back to our regularly scheduled programming fun. I'm not going to tell you what that's going to be. We're going total surprise in November for you. So you better come back and check it out. Till then, stay safe, stay spooky, and see ya on the flip side.